There are moments in life when the truth doesn't whisper, it crashes down with such weight that everything we once believed begins to tremble. Imagine carrying yourself with grace through the brightest celebrations and the darkest nights, only to suddenly face a revelation that could shake the very ground beneath you. Can a single truth rewrite history, or does history bend itself to bury the truth forever? And when the silence of generations is broken, does it set someone free, or does it chain them even more tightly to the shadows of the past? These are the haunting questions surrounding Princess Catherine, whose life took an unimaginable turn when a quiet medical note led to a revelation tied not only to her, but to Princess Diana, the woman whose presence still lingers in every corner of the monarchy. Catherine had grown used to the rhythm of palace life, where privacy is both a shield and a prison. Medical matters, especially within the royal walls, were cloaked in discretion, guarded not just by doctors but by traditions older than anyone alive. She stepped into the palace's private medical wing expecting the same routine that had defined countless visits before. Yet something was different this time. Among the sterile language of medical records, one cold phrase stood out like a warning bell: DNA confirmation required. It looked simple, even ordinary at first glance, but Catherine felt an instant unease. It was not the kind of request that belonged to her situation, not the kind of phrase that appeared by accident. She asked questions, but the doctors smiled politely, brushing her concerns aside with vague reassurances that only deepened her suspicion. Their silence spoke louder than words, and Catherine's instincts told her she was walking into a storm disguised as routine. It was not just the note. It was the air in the room, the stiffness in the staff's movements, the guarded glances exchanged when they thought she wasn't looking. The way her blood sample was handled with an almost ceremonial care unsettled her. The test, they insisted, was nothing extraordinary. But Catherine had spent years living under the careful management of image, tone, and narrative. She could feel when something was being hidden. And this time, she sensed that the secret was bigger than herself. Her mind, almost unwillingly, turned to Diana. For years, the late Princess of Wales had been a ghostly presence in Catherine's life, not just through William's memories but through the endless comparisons made by the world. Diana's beauty, her fragility, her strength, her tragedy, it was all inescapable. What if this test wasn't about Catherine at all? What if it was about Diana, about a truth so carefully buried that its reappearance could fracture the monarchy? Days passed, and Catherine felt the palace around her grow heavier with whispers and unease. Staff avoided eye contact, conversations halted abruptly when she entered a room, and the silence of those halls became deafening. Rumors trickled in. Rumors that the test was meant to trace something not of Catherine's health, but of her bloodline, her connection to Diana. She remembered Diana's own struggles, the moments captured in photographs, the words hidden in interviews, the fragile truths revealed in letters. Diana's life had always seemed like a puzzle with missing pieces. Now, those pieces appeared to be resurfacing, demanding to be placed back into history no matter the cost. The night before the results were due, Catherine could not rest. Kensington Palace, so often portrayed as regal and comforting, felt instead like a maze of ghosts. Every shadow seemed to carry Diana's face, every silent corridor echoed with the weight of unspoken truths. Catherine lay awake, her thoughts colliding with images of William's childhood pain, Diana's isolation, and the monarchy's unyielding walls of secrecy. It was as if the past itself had crept into her present, forcing her to confront not just her fears, but the responsibility of holding a truth that could no longer be silenced. She felt Diana with her that night, not as a haunting, but as a presence, a mother who had never truly been heard, standing at the threshold of finally being acknowledged. Morning came, and with it, the envelope. Plain, sealed, and devastatingly ordinary in its appearance. Yet inside it was the weight of a truth heavy enough to crush or transform an entire monarchy. Catherine held it with trembling hands, fully aware that this was no longer about health or privacy. It was about history, legacy, and the truth that had been denied for decades. When she opened it, the word she read confirmed her deepest fear. The test did not support the narrative she had been led to believe. Instead, it revealed a hidden connection tied to Diana, a secret so explosive that it immediately reframed Catherine's role, not just as a wife or future queen, but as the bearer of a truth powerful enough to destabilize the crown. Shock froze her, then sorrow followed. Her thoughts turned to William, to the boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin, carrying a grief too heavy for a child. How could she bring this to him? What would it mean for their children, for the life they had built? And what did it say about Diana, that the palace had once again chosen silence and secrecy over dignity and truth. Catherine now understood the cruelty of that silence. Diana's struggles, her vulnerability, had not been fully seen. What the world had been allowed to witness was only a fraction of the truth. The rest had been buried, concealed beneath layers of tradition and fear. And Catherine had stumbled into the heart of it. The monarchy has always prided itself on continuity, on projecting stability even when storms raged behind the walls. But this revelation was not one that could be smoothed over with a carefully worded statement or a staged photograph. This was blood. This was DNA. This was undeniable. For Catherine, it felt like betrayal, not by William, not by Diana, but by the very institution she had devoted her life to serving. The monarchy's silence, its carefully crafted facade, now looked like a mask covering generations of deception. And if Diana had been silenced in life, would Catherine be silenced now? The palace moved swiftly, of course. Courtiers and advisers rushed in, draped in duty and loyalty, urging Catherine to remain silent. They appealed to her sense of responsibility as a wife, a mother, a future queen. They told her the truth would only cause pain, that it would destabilize not just her family but the nation. Yet Catherine saw their fear for what it was, not fear of pain, but fear of losing control. Their urgency revealed the truth. This was not about protecting Diana's dignity or Catherine's well-being. It was about preserving the monarchy's carefully constructed image. For Catherine, the weight of their words only deepened her resolve. If silence had destroyed Diana, then silence could not be allowed to continue. Walking the gilded halls of the palace now felt suffocating. The portraits of past monarchs looked less like symbols of grandeur and more like watchful guards enforcing silence. Catherine felt the burden of being trapped in history's cage, a cage Diana herself had never escaped. But she also felt something else, a growing strength. Honoring Diana did not mean continuing the silence. It meant facing the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how dangerous. Catherine realized she had become the pivotal figure in a battle between tradition and honesty, between illusion and reality. And she was no longer willing to be silent. William, too, could not escape this truth. Trained since birth to protect the monarchy, to serve the crown above himself, he now found himself torn between duty and love. When Catherine shared the results with him, the pain in his face was unbearable. Disbelief, anger, sorrow, all of it collided within him. His mother's memory was no longer just personal grief, it was now a battlefield of truth against the silence that had ruled his life. The evidence sat between them, demanding not just acknowledgement but action. For the first time, William and Catherine stood together, not just as heirs to a throne, but as defenders of truth against the system that had raised them. What began as a medical inquiry had become a revolution within the palace walls. The truth of Diana's bloodline, long hidden, now illuminated every lie and every silence that had been used to protect the crown. Catherine felt the crushing responsibility of holding history in her hands, knowing the public would soon demand answers. Media whispers had already grown louder, and the world was ready to listen. No amount of secrecy could hold back the storm that was about to break. The palace scrambled to regain control, pushing narratives and issuing statements crafted to calm the growing questions. But the people no longer trusted the silence. For once, they wanted truth. And Catherine and William, refusing to betray Diana again, chose to step forward. Their decision sent shockwaves across the world. No longer was Diana's story a carefully curated tragedy. It was raw, human, and painfully real. The monarchy, shaken to its core, faced a reckoning it had avoided for decades. For some, this revelation threatened its very survival. But for others, it was the first honest step toward redemption. Catherine's courage in refusing silence transformed her into something beyond a princess. She became a symbol of change, of transparency, of the demand for truth even when it was dangerous. And William, standing beside her, showed the world that even heirs to a throne can choose integrity over illusion. Their stance opened the door to a new era for the monarchy, one where dignity was not built on deception but on honesty. Diana's voice, long silenced, was finally heard, not through speeches or interviews, but through the truth that Catherine unearthed. The crown could no longer hide behind polished smiles and golden traditions. It now faced the world stripped bare, challenged to survive not through secrecy, but through truth. The silence that had defined it for centuries was broken, and in its place came the possibility of something new. For Diana, it was not just justice. It was freedom. In the end, Catherine's revelation became more than a scandal or a crisis. It became a turning point, a reminder that no institution can outlive the truth forever. History may bend, but it never breaks completely. And when it rises, it demands to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be faced with courage. Catherine and William's choice to honor Diana with honesty ensured that her legacy was no longer shaped by silence but by the undeniable strength of truth. So as this story continues to unfold, one question lingers. Has Catherine's courage finally freed Diana's spirit, or has it unleashed a storm the crown may never survive? Either way, the world is watching, and the truth can no longer be buried. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. If you found it moving, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories that shape our world. Your support helps us bring these voices, past and present, into the light where they belong.